So the Indiana Fever come into here after losing 3 of their last.
Caitlin Clark just did something that no injured player has ever done before. With 0 seconds on the clock, she marched straight toward referee Agon Abazi and delivered a message that sent shockwaves through the entire arena. You gave them every chance to win. But what happened next reveals something far more disturbing about the WNBA than anyone wants to admit. Last night at Crypto.com Arena, while Clark sat on the bench nursing her injury, she witnessed something that made her blood boil. And honestly, once you see what really went down, you'll understand why the biggest star in women's basketball couldn't keep quiet anymore. Because this isn't just about one bad call or one questionable referee. This is about a pattern so obvious, so blatant, that it makes you wonder if some of these officials have betting apps open on their phones during timeouts. Let me paint you a picture of what's really happening in the WNBA right now. Every single game, without fail, there are calls so bad that fans are learning referees' names, and not in a good way. Agon Abazi, Angela Safrone, Tyler Ricks, these aren't players or coaches. These are officials who've become infamous for making decisions that defy logic, physics, and sometimes even the basic rules of basketball. And Caitlin Clark, watching from the sidelines, has been taking notes. The incident that finally pushed Clark over the edge happened with just 0.4 seconds left on the game clock. The Los Angeles Sparks were shooting a free throw, and what transpired next should have been impossible. After the shot, Dearica Hamby grabbed the rebound. The clock started ticking. The buzzer sounded. You could see it, hear it. The entire arena knew the game was over. But then, in a move that defies explanation, referee Agon Abazi granted Kelsey Plum a timeout that she called after the buzzer had already gone off. Now, for those who don't know basketball rules, let me break this down. With 0.3 seconds or less on the clock, you can only tip the ball in. No catching, no shooting, just a tip. With 0.4 seconds, technically, you can catch and shoot, but it's incredibly tight. But here's where it gets suspicious. In that 0.4 seconds, Hamby had to secure the rebound. Plum had to recognize the situation and signal for timeout, and the referee had to see and grant that timeout. All of this supposedly happened in less than half a second, even though the buzzer was already sounding when Plum's hands came together for the timeout signal. This is basic math, basic physics, and basic common sense. Yet somehow, Abazi saw fit to grant that timeout anyway. And that's when Caitlin Clark lost it. She'd been watching this kind of thing happen all season, but this was the final straw. As her teammates celebrated what should have been a victory, Clark was already making her way toward the officials. The footage is remarkable. You can see Aaliyah Boston, Clark's teammate, immediately recognizing what's about to happen. Boston rushes over, practically grabbing Clark to prevent her from reaching the referees. Other players quickly form a barrier, understanding that their injured superstar is about to say something that could get her in serious trouble. But Clark's message was already delivered, her finger pointing at the opposing team as she made it clear exactly what she thought had just happened. What makes this even more significant is that Clark wasn't even playing. She's been sidelined with an injury, relegated to watching from the bench. But instead of checking out mentally, she's been studying the game like never before. Without the adrenaline of playing, without the tunnel vision that comes with being on the court, she's had a perfect vantage point to observe the officiating patterns. And apparently, she doesn't like what she's been seeing. This isn't just about one game or one bad call. Throughout the season, we've witnessed a disturbing pattern. There was the play where Aaliyah Edwards was literally wrapped up by an opponent. No whistle. Aja Wilson bear-hugged Lexi Hull from behind after a rebound. Again, no call. Dijanai Carrington took a swipe at Clark's face earlier in the season, somehow missed by all 3 officials. These aren't subtle judgment calls. These are obvious fouls that any high school referee would catch. Yet somehow they escape the attention of supposedly professional officials. The implications here are staggering. When officiating becomes this consistently poor, when patterns emerge that seem to favor certain outcomes, you have to start asking uncomfortable questions. Are these officials simply incompetent? Or is something more sinister at play? Because when you can predict which calls will be missed based on which teams are playing and what the point spread is, that's not incompetence. That's a pattern. What's particularly fascinating about Clark's current situation is the power she wields even while injured. When she entered the arena last night, before the game even started, the crowd erupted, thousands of fans cheering wildly for a player who wasn't even going to touch the basketball. She walked through the tunnel surrounded by security, not just one bodyguard like usual, but multiple personnel maintaining a careful perimeter around her. The increase in security is notable, suggesting the league recognizes both her value and the potential volatility of the situation. As Clark made her way to the bench, fans pressed forward, desperate for autographs, selfies, or just a moment of acknowledgement from the woman who's transformed women's basketball. She obliged as many as she could, signing items and interacting with supporters, all while security maintained that protective bubble. It was like watching Tiger Woods at the Masters or Michael Jordan in his prime, except this athlete wasn't even playing. This is the reality the WNBA faces. Their biggest star, the player responsible for sold-out arenas and record television ratings, is publicly calling out the integrity of their officiating. When Clark points at the opposing team and accuses a referee of giving them every chance to win, she's not just venting frustration. She's questioning the fundamental fairness of the competition. The financial ramifications can't be ignored. Sports betting has exploded in recent years, with billions of dollars wagered on games across all sports. The WNBA, while smaller than other leagues, still sees significant betting action. When officiating becomes questionable, when patterns emerge that seem to benefit certain outcomes, the integrity of the entire sport comes into question. And once fans start believing games might be influenced by factors beyond athletic performance, you've got a crisis that threatens the very foundation of professional sports. Consider what's at stake here. The WNBA has spent decades fighting for legitimacy, for respect, for recognition as a professional sports league worthy of attention and investment. Then along comes Caitlin Clark, a generational talent who brings unprecedented attention to the game. Attendance records are shattered wherever she plays. Television ratings spike when she's on court. Young girls wear her jersey and practice her signature long-range threes in driveways across America. But all of that progress, all of that momentum, can be undone if fans lose faith in the integrity of the games. When your biggest star is essentially accusing officials of bias or worse, that's not a small problem. It's an existential threat to the league's credibility. Because Clark isn't just any player. She's the face of women's basketball, the athlete who's brought more new fans to the WNBA than anyone in history. The pattern of questionable calls extends beyond just missed fouls. There are the phantom violations called at crucial moments, the inconsistent application of rules depending on which team has possession, the mysterious technical fouls assessed for seemingly minor infractions, while egregious behavior goes unpunished. It's reached a point where fans can predict certain calls based on the game situation, rather than what actually happens on the court. What's even more troubling is how normalized this has become. Players shoot terrible percentages, games feature an unusual number of turnovers, and everyone just shrugs because that's the WNBA. But what if some of those misses aren't just bad shooting nights? What if the inconsistent officiating creates an environment where players can't get into rhythm because they never know what will or won't be called? When you can't trust the officials to call the game fairly, it affects everything from game planning to player development. The league's response to this crisis has been notably absent. While other professional sports have implemented review systems, accountability measures, and transparency initiatives for their officiating, the WNBA seems content to let the status quo persist. There's no public accountability for blown calls, no explanation for controversial decisions, no apparent consequences for officials who consistently make questionable judgments. This silence becomes even more deafening when contrasted with how vocal the league is about other issues. They'll issue statements about social justice, promote various causes, and celebrate their players' achievements. But when it comes to addressing the elephant in the room, the officiating that threatens to undermine everything else, there's radio silence. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark continues to watch, continues to observe, continues to build her case. Every game she sits out is another opportunity to study the patterns, to document the inconsistencies, to prepare for her eventual return. Because make no mistake, when Clark comes back from injury, the dynamic between her and these officials will be must-watch television. She's already shown she's not afraid to speak up. What happens when she's back on the court, subject to these same questionable calls? The irony is palpable. The WNBA finally has its transcendent star, someone who can fill arenas and drive ratings like never before. But instead of protecting that asset, instead of ensuring she plays in fairly officiated games, they're allowing a situation where she feels compelled to confront referees after the final buzzer. It's like having a goose that lays golden eggs and then letting someone repeatedly hit it with a stick. Other players are watching too. When someone of Clark's stature speaks up, it gives permission for others to do the same. The whispers in locker rooms about certain officials, the private conversations about questionable patterns, The frustrations that have been building for years, all of it could come spilling out if the league doesn't address this issue soon. The solution seems straightforward. Investigate the officiating, implement better training and accountability measures, perhaps bring in new officials who aren't already known by name to every frustrated fan. Use technology to review calls, create transparency in the process, and show players and fans that fairness matters. But will the league take these steps? Or will they continue to ignore the problem, hoping it goes away on its own? As we've seen throughout sports history, ignoring integrity issues doesn't make them disappear. It makes them metastasize. What starts as questionable officiating can evolve into full-blown scandals that tarnish leagues for generations. The NBA had its Tim Donaghy scandal. Baseball had the Black Sox. The WNBA has the opportunity to address their issues before they reach that level, but the window is closing. The clock is ticking on the league's response. And unlike that controversial timeout in last night's game, this one can't be called after the buzzer sounds. Caitlin Clark has thrown down the gauntlet, publicly challenging the integrity of WNBA officiating. Her words, "You gave them every chance to win," aren't just an accusation against one referee. They're a warning shot to the entire league. Because here's what the WNBA needs to understand. Caitlin Clark doesn't need them as much as they need her. She's already proven she can fill arenas, drive ratings, and inspire a generation of young players. If the league can't provide fair, competently officiated games, there are other options. International leagues would welcome her with open arms. Media opportunities abound. The leverage has shifted, and Clark knows it. The question now isn't whether the WNBA has an officiating problem. Clark's post-game confrontation made that abundantly clear. The question is whether the league has the wisdom and courage to address it before their golden goose decides she's had enough. Because when the face of your sport publicly questions the integrity of your games, that's not just a PR problem. That's a crisis that threatens everything you've built. As fans, we're left to wonder, how many more questionable calls will we witness? How many more impossible timeouts will be granted? How many more obvious fouls will go uncalled? And perhaps most importantly, how long will Caitlin Clark tolerate playing in a league where she has to worry about the officials as much as her opponents? The answer to that last question might determine the future of women's professional basketball in America. Because if Caitlin Clark loses faith in the WNBA's integrity, she won't be the only one. The millions of fans she's brought to the game will follow her lead. And once that trust is broken, once fans believe the fix might be in, it's nearly impossible to win them back. The ball is in the WNBA's court now. They can either address the officiating crisis head-on, implementing real reforms and accountability measures, or they can continue to whistle past the graveyard while their biggest star calls out their referees on live television. One path leads to growth and credibility. The other leads to a future where every close game is viewed with suspicion, where every controversial call sparks conspiracy theories, where the integrity of the sport itself is constantly in question. Caitlin Clark has spoken. She's made it clear that she sees what's happening and she's not afraid to call it out. The only question remaining is whether the WNBA is listening, or whether they're content to let their officiating problem fester until it becomes a full-blown scandal. Time will tell, but one thing is certain. With Clark watching from the bench, taking notes and preparing for her return, the status quo is no longer acceptable. Change is coming to the WNBA, whether the league wants it or not.